and welcome to another fabulous episode of Thyroid Refresh TV, a podcast dedicated to help you live a thyroid healthy lifestyle. And we're so glad to be back with you again. I'm Dana Bowman, and part of Jenny and I's mission has been to bring to you just some simple ways to empower your life and not be overwhelmed. So thank you.
And I'm Jenny Mahar, and we are thrilled to be here today with Heather Dane to talk about transcending the quick or magical fix so that we can do the grounded work of healing. This is going to be a juicy conversation. So settle in, guys, and get ready for a great show. And welcome, Heather. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Jenny and Dana. I'm excited to be here.
Before we jump in, Heather and I have connected. It's been a year or so on social media. She's just an incredible person. Her bio is so diverse, and I want to read it to you all so you know exactly what you're getting before we start. A former high-powered corporate executive who suffered massive burnout, Heather Dane took a radical career leap after spending many years investigating the cause of her myriad health problems. Now a highly sought-after health coach, Dane combines her accumulated business and health acumen to support thousands of people in healing naturally with lifestyle, nutrition, and nutritional supplements. I could end there if we wanted to be simple, but I want to go on. During her years as a personal health coach to world-renowned alternative health pioneer Louise Hay, who, rest in peace, we all love, she joined forces with her to bring the most cutting-edge wisdom, including a culmination of Hay's lifetime of work in their two books, Loving Yourself to Great Health and The Bone Broth Secret. These books reveal how making loving choices about the food you eat and the thoughts you think can deeply nourish your body and soul. Heather is the visionary behind the Wellness Project by Price Pottinger Nutrition Foundation, a nonprofit project to rebuild medicine with indigenous peoples around the world. She's a regular contributor to Mind Body Green. She's on Hay House Radio, healyourlife.com for just a little while longer, and some replays coming up. She's considered a 21st century medicine woman. She draws from her Native American culture. I can't say the name. I'm going to let her explain those to you and say them later, combining ancient wisdom and alternative health training and modern technology to offer the most cutting-edge prescriptive remedies for your health, and so much more. I could just go on and on and on. We're so excited to have you today. Thank you so much for joining us, Heather.
Thank you. I'm excited for today's conversation.
Before we dive in, can you share with us a little bit about your amazing story and trajectory?
Yeah, I actually started to have symptoms around the age of 7. I got the polio vaccine, and shortly thereafter, I woke up one day and I was paralyzed. My legs, from the legs down, for about a week to two weeks. And when my parents took me to the doctor said I had a mystery virus. And we didn't really know what it was or how long it was going to last. And I don't even remember being scared at the time, but my father was a lacrosse coach and he was always traveling. And I knew it was serious because my mother had to call him to come home and carry me around the house. So I did recover from that, but little by little, I started to have odd symptoms. By the time I was 10 years old, what was the most distressing was that I remember going to my mother and telling her that when I would eat, I wouldn't feel well. Most of the time I didn't feel well after I ate, but I would feel like everything got stuck. Like it almost felt like from, right here down to the bottom of my abdomen, I would feel completely topped off with food that wasn't digesting. And almost like I couldn't put anything else in, but at the same time I was starving. And so I ended up having a very troubled relationship with food, to the point where eventually I was in so much pain and nothing was moving that I turned to bulimia, the eating disorder bulimia, because nothing was processing through my body, and the only way I could feel better was to get it out. And that became, I think, of all the other things that you would think would be issues, that became the issue that I think prompted me to start looking into what is going on here, because I felt ashamed. I had this eating disorder, this addiction that The doctors were telling me it was all in my head, that I was never going to recover, that nobody could figure out what was wrong with me, what was going on with my digestive system. And when I, told my parents about having an eating disorder, it became this big giant thing. What are we going to do? She's going to die. This is back in the 80s when nobody really knew about gut health, gluten, all the things we know today. Nobody knew about any of that. So I was this mystery from having these health issues to suddenly having an addiction to food. And I started to research because the doctors wanted to put me on medications, antidepressants, and they wanted to put me into treatment centers. And as I was studying, I kind of went out and got my own books and started reading about it. I found out that antidepressants are not that effective. The studies were showing the antidepressants were only as effective as talk therapy. And so I did try talk therapy. It didn't really work for me either, but this is not a knock on talk therapy, because it helps to know you're not alone in the world, but it didn't help me change, and it didn't help the symptoms go away. By the time I got into college, the symptoms got really bad, to the point where I was doubled over in pain all the time. And my body started having pain everywhere. And I started studying nutrition. So I was a business major, and I started shifting a lot of my classes to the summer so that I could study and double major in nutrition. And I still wasn't finding any answers. The eating disorder treatment center came up again in college. And as I looked at that, everybody who went into the treatment center, it was like $100,000 or more. Parents were mortgaging their houses to get their kids in. And within about a month, the kids were coming home and relapsing. And so I started questioning what is going on, like what else is going on here. And so I dove into some sort of background studies while I went about my life. I graduated, I went into the corporate world. I worked, 12 to 16-hour days, and thought that corporate life was going to be the thing for me. But behind the scenes, I wasn't happy. I was not feeling like I was on the path that I came here to do, but I didn't know what I really wanted to do. And so I continued to study. What I started doing when I started getting on the healing path is I got a diagnosis that my gallbladder was diseased. And I went to this very special doctor. I drove hours and hours to go, and he did this test, and he basically said that my gallbladder was not moving the right way. So I didn't have any bile, the appropriate amount of bile to digest anything. And he said, you're not going to feel well no matter what you eat. And you're never going to, he said, your thyroid, my hair was all dry and crispy when I went to him. And he said, you're never going to recover unless you get this diseased gallbladder out. So I got scared, because now we're talking about taking an organ out of my body. And I knew enough to know that it was an organ that was necessary for digestion, even though the medical industry tells us it's unnecessary. And I went home and I read about it. And what I found was that within about a couple of years, 66% of people end up with the same exact symptoms they had before they got their gallbladder out. And as I was looking around at what to do and trying to decide what to do, I came across some work and some writings and books, and where people said, if you change your diet, you can heal your gallbladder. And that really resonated with me. But the question was, well, what do I eat and how do I do this? And so I started focusing on an anti-candida diet, something that was going to help with getting rid of, I thought maybe I had candida or something like that. And I started eating a gluten-free, dairy-free, sugar-free diet. And I started to feel better. The first thing I noticed was no more pain. And when I didn't have, and then I was feeling like my body was kind of digesting. And without the pain, without the cravings, and with my body digesting, I didn't have those cravings to eat, like a whole box of cookies anymore. And I didn't have, all the challenges that I was having in my body. And so it gave me enough space to continue to nourish myself well. The first year and a half, my body went through a detox, and I had all of the low thyroid symptoms and all of that. I was exhausted, but my body was definitely detoxing, and I was actually digesting again. And so that really changed my life to see that what was I doing all these years? You know, I mean, I would say that people probably would have said that I ate healthy. And I was at one time one of those people who thought fat-free was healthy. So I went through that crazy fad that is pretty terrible. But I didn't know how to eat. And on what really started to shift in my digestion was, you know, after reading everybody's book about what food I was supposed to eat, I decided one day to sit down and go into my body and ask myself, what foods make me feel the most nourished? What foods do I feel most drawn to? When do I feel the most satisfied in the center of my body? Where do I feel like my energy is actually concentrated in my body instead of, you know, scattered around up in my head all the time? And I wrote all of those down and I started eating that diet. And I think that was my first inkling that there is no one size fits all approach. By the time I turned 37, I got diagnosed. I went to another specialized doctor. I'd been doing very well, but there were still issues going on. And the doctor told me I had Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. And what that is a connective tissue disorder. And that means that the connective tissue in my body is unreliable. So it explained a lot of things for me as to why I would break a bone if I was unzippering something, or I would, why my digestive system seized up, because connective tissue is the most abundant protein in the body. It's the glue that holds the body together, your hair, skin, your nails, bones, your lymphatic system, your blood, the circulatory system. It makes your nervous system work. People with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome tend to have upwards of 50 symptoms, including low thyroid, adrenal fatigue, and something called POTS, which is postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. And that generally means that there is no balance in blood and nerves and things like that. So when you lie down and you get up, you can have varying symptoms that can be mild to serious. And so there were all of these things that fell under the umbrella of Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. And the prognosis for somebody with Ehlers-Danlos, it's a genetic condition that is untreatable and incurable. And so that's what my doctor told me. And it was basically like, it's untreatable and uncurable, so good luck. And at the time, they didn't understand, the doctors, the medical system didn't understand that the digestive system was heavily involved, because our digestive organs are made up of connective tissue. And that's why my gallbladder was not squeezing out the bile, because it requires the muscular movement of the digestive system. And so I had sort of a kind of paralysis of my digestive system. So I was kind of a mess from head to toe. And the main thing that I was wondering about and concerned about was, when we all turn 40, every single one of us, the collagen production in the body dramatically decreases. Which means that, you know, the statement of, you know, you'll hear people say, by the time you turn 40, the body falls apart. And that is, I think, a modern statement that Louise Hay would have said, that's an affirmation. Don't say that. You know, but it's a modern testament to the fact that we don't know how to nourish our collagen system. Mm-hmm. We don't know how to nourish our bodies in such a way that our collagen could stay strong, because our ancestors didn't have this. And whilst both sides of my family have Ehlers-Danlos related symptoms, no one has had the symptoms that I've had. So everyone has lived a healthy, productive life with minor things happening here and there, some a little more serious, but nothing super serious. And then why did I come in having all of those symptoms? So I think that the further away we get from eating our ancestral diet, or eating a more natural diet, and living a life that surrounds a good routine of taking care of ourselves, we start to show symptoms, express symptoms that exist in our DNA, these genetic symptoms. So here I am looking at what 40 might bring for me. And I did start to have intestinal prolapses, and I started to have some other issues. So that's when I dove into the study of epigenetics and genetics. And You may have heard from Dr. Bruce Lipton about epigenetics, which means that there's something above the genes. So there was a human genome project where scientists from around the world got together to study our genetics, and they thought that they were going to prove that your genes dictate your health, and they debunked themselves and proved that only 5% of our health is dictated by our genes, and the 95% is something above the genes, which can include our environment or our perception of the environment, the food we eat, the thoughts we think, the lifestyle we lead. Those are the things that just determine 95% of the genetic blueprint that is going to express in our lives. So
right, and just to interrupt, I have a kind of question or thought about that. So for the people listening, my understanding is that you have your genetics, but being able to be above it is something needs to get turned on, and we can turn it on or turn it off, correct?
Yes. Yes.
That's a simple way to say it, but that's right, correct?
Yes. So for example, yes, exactly. You have it exactly right. So for example, some of the folks watching us will have changed their diet and started to feel better. Some people will be diagnosed with Hashimoto's and decide to go the natural route, and they'll start feeling better and having more energy, and they'll think, well, doctors told me I wouldn't be able to do this. What you're doing when you're eating well and you're changing your lifestyle and you're getting more sleep and you're removing stressors from your life is you're actually activating that 95% in that every gene that we have, we all come in with certain genetic variances, and you hear them called mutations in the epigenetic world, a gene mutation. So I had, when I looked at all of my collagen genes, upwards of 50 plus double mutations, which means I had a huge propensity to have problems with my collagen. And I decided that, I would be a test case for myself. And this was about 10 years ago. So for a long time, I've been working with clients and also with myself to test these things out. But we see the studies. You start to make a change. You start to deliver food that affects that gene. So each gene requires a vitamin, a mineral, a protein, an enzyme. It requires nutrients to make it function properly. So when you go look at the gene that's expressing, and we don't look at all gene mutations, we only look at the ones that are expressing its symptoms. So when you have a symptom and you can, sort of bring it to which gene it might be creating that symptom, you see the nutrients required to make that gene work. You can see that because that's been mapped out. So we can see that. So now we deliver foods and supplements that match what that gene needs in order to turn the symptom off. Mm-hmm. And as people start to eat those foods and take those supplements, they can actually turn those switches off. One really good reason why that is because we have this bacteria in the body, and so many people have these bacterial imbalances, but the good bacteria in the body, or the balance of good and bad that create balance in the body, they are auxiliary DNA. They actually can help us turn those switches on and off. So we need to feed them well. We need to feed them healthy foods that keep the balance in a really healthy way for us, so that they can be part of the process of helping those genes stop expressing. So that's just one sort of helper we have in our bodies. The digestive system is a huge helper to help get the nutrients that we need. So once those nutrients go into the body, suddenly we have the opportunity to switch those symptoms off. Problem is, most people want it overnight. And while some people may feel better when they take one supplement, they may actually be so deficient that they feel better right away. Like vitamin B12, for people who really respond to vitamin B12, the real responders will feel it almost overnight, but not everybody will. And so if we're looking for an overnight thing and we try it for a week and say this doesn't work, then we lose out on the opportunity of creating a lifestyle where we nourish ourselves, and over time the body starts to repair. Mm-hmm. So that's what I did. And these days, what I would say, like, I was able to fix prolapses. I've been able to fix a lot of things that doctors said couldn't be fixed. I used to have arthritis, which is a symptom of Ehlers-Danlos, where my knuckles would blow up if I didn't get enough sleep or at any random moment. And I don't get any of that anymore. Like, I was nervous because I thought I had arthritis and it was going to be forever, but it doesn't happen anymore. So I want to say all of this to say that I had some of the sort of worst, what's considered old people symptoms, and they got resolved and smoothed out with food and with lifestyle changes. I left my corporate job and I started thinking about, what do I want to be when I grow up, and wrote a vision and figured out what I came here to do and started doing that work instead, and smoothing my lifestyle out so that I could get enough sleep and manage the symptoms that I had while I was on my recovery journey and things like that. So I think it sort of required a lifestyle overhaul. And one of the things that we're talking about today is skipping over the day-to-day routine type stuff that's super unsexy, and talking about, how many people want magic and, floaty stuff and the next shamanic journey, and they want to shapeshift. And I'm not knocking any of those wonderful healing opportunities that we have, but I think sometimes we and I would be one of those people. We bounce around from thing to thing to thing without getting better, because we maybe are not as excited about just getting enough sleep or just eating well for the day.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
That's so true.
That's a message that I think really speaks to our audience and to all of us who are on this path of doing the daily, day-to-day, nitty-gritty work of staying healthy and living well. And it doesn't come in a bottle. It doesn't come in a box. It doesn't even come in a, some magical course or, something like that. I mean, I think, like you said, those things can be great tools for teaching us, for awakening, for shifting our perspective.
Yeah, exactly.
But, I mean, what an incredible story, and multifaceted health issues where you've had to do a different but parallel journey to the journey that so many of us are on, trying to live well with thyroid disease. New stuff pops up. You got to look at something else. How does your body respond to what you feed it, what you put in it? And then how do I get myself to stay with this and not just have the aha moment, and then a month later I've completely forgotten about it and I'm back to doing whatever I did before.
Yeah.
But you think of it like common sense. It's strange because I'm one of those people who has a lot of common sense, and there's common sense out there. But what's interesting to me is that you think about how long it took for you to get, kind of where I am in my life and my age. And then I want the happy, quick pill. And why is everybody wanting that? Why is that the sexiest version? Why is that the one that we want to buy so desperately? Because we all know deep down that it isn't really going to be a quick fix.
Yeah.
I mean, really, it just isn't. It took us this long to get here. There is really no magic pill. It would be cool in a way if we could just snap our fingers, but that's really not life. That's not really living life. And so with all the common sense, you'd think that people would be able to go, okay, this 10-day ab reset is going to make my abs rock hard and abs of steel, right? And that's just not the way of, 6-minute abs. It's just not the way of the world.
Yeah.
And to me, that's just this oxymoron of sorts,
I'd love to hear your take on that.
Yeah.
What is it in our innate humanity or drive or whatever that can override that common sense sometimes?
Well, I guess I'll kick off the discussion by saying that when I first got on my healing journey and started to change my diet, and remember, this was before anybody knew what gluten was. I mean, people had heard of it once in a while, but nobody really knew what this was, and nobody knew what food allergies were or anything like that back then. So when I first started doing this, I was an executive in a corporate environment, and very much I was one of the only women in a lot of meetings. It was always mostly men. It was a type A personality or type company, churn and burn, and I was young. And so, here I was, somebody who had to make decisions that wouldn't be popular in an environment like that. Like the first thing I decided to do was stop working on weekends, and that was super scary. But I did that because that was one of the sort of self-care. I wanted to give myself an actual weekend, even one day off, but 2 days off of working. And I was terrified. And I think, for anybody that's working in a corporate job or working for other people or something, there is this fear. Even if for entrepreneurs who have their own business, there's this fear that if we take time for ourselves, it's going to mean that we're not going to be very successful. And that's what I believed. But what I found out was because my brain was functioning better, I was making better decisions because I was actually digesting and I was actually nourishing my body and I was getting more sleep and I was making better decisions. So I was working smarter. And I worked with a business coach who helped me with my self-care, because I was not a person who was wired for self-care. I was wired for being a workaholic. So I set some goals for myself around my self-care and around how I was approaching work and working on the things that were what I called my power of three, the things that were visible, that were important, and ditching all the stuff that was, nobody was going to notice. And what happened was everybody started complimenting me on how hard I was working. Like they didn't notice that I wasn't working so many hours. And that's when I first realized, what was I doing? Like, wow. I hadn't even stopped to think how I was spending my time. And this was way before social media, but think about right now where how much time do we get sucked into Facebook or Instagram? How much time is going into something that's not improving our lives? Mm-hmm. And we think we need to keep up with it because, if we are not in the know, then it's going to be a problem or something like that. So there were all these areas where I was spending time that wasn't adding to my joy or my rest or my health or even my getting a great job done where people would notice. So the year that I did this and I started practicing with my team, I had 44 people reporting to me, and I started doing this with my directors on my team where we'd all start working on our self-care. I brought essential oils. Now remember, this is a conservative financial services corporate environment. I brought a halogen light in because I didn't want the fluorescence. I brought in an essential oils diffuser so I could diffuse Tulsi, holy basil, that anti-stress, essential oil in my office. And I remember the first time this guy in a suit came in, like one of the senior executives came in, and he opened the door to my office, and I'm like, wondering what he's going to say about my Tulsi going through the air. And he was like, "Oh, it smells really good in here." And then all of a sudden I had people showing up in my office and they'd sit down in front of me and I would say, "What's up?" And they'd say, "I just came in to relax." So here I was thinking,
that's fantastic.
Oh my, right? It just, yeah.
Wow, what a moment.
I started leaving at 5 o'clock to do yoga. My boss, who was a woman, thank heavens, and who, understood what I was doing, she encouraged me. So if it was 5 o'clock, she'd look at her watch and she'd go like this to me because if we were still in a meeting and it was going to go till 7 o'clock, she'd tell me to leave because I was going to my yoga class. Mm-hmm. So again, conservative company, I'm going to yoga. I've got my yoga clothes under my outfit. And I was still so like in adrenaline mode that I would finish dressing for yoga in the car at the red lights. I'd be pulling my pants up under my skirt and whipping my skirt off. And I would be wiping my face with a wipe at the red light. And by the time I got to yoga, I'd go in, slap my mat down and I'd be like this, ready.
I'm here.
Not relaxed. Wow. So I still had things to resolve, but it was better. And that year, when I was leaving at 5 to do yoga and taking weekends off, I got the biggest promotion I ever had in my career. My entire team was the highest performing team in the company, and we all got huge raises. And I, got a lot of accolades from the higher ups about how successful I was that year. And I thought, here I was taking care of myself.
Right.
And so
that was your focus, right?
Yeah. And also with my brain functioning better, because I thought, how much time did I spend in brain fog You know, when I wasn't eating well and I wasn't getting enough sleep and I was constantly in this state of like brain fog, that I wasn't making good decisions. And so I think some of it was making good decisions and some of it was figuring out how I could get offload, stop being a yes person and a people pleaser, and offload, you know, some of the stuff that didn't matter from my plate. So I think that, you know, this is why I think healing is so confusing and it's such a big thing. We rush to these fancy techniques and we forget that, think of all those layers I had to peel away. That was 3 years in my corporate life of trying to overhaul my lifestyle before I finally decided that I was living in an environment, a churn and burn type A, burnout type environment. And even though I was making strides in my own self-care and in my team's self-care, the organization, it was kind of trying to boil the ocean with an organization that still wanted everybody to stay up till 1 o'clock in the morning to get a request for proposal out for a sale, or travel and get 4 hours of sleep and go to the meeting in the morning or something like that. You know, being in that environment, I realized eventually was not going to help me stay on my path. It was going to key me into the part of me that loves to be a workaholic. So that's when I decided to leave and admit that I wanted to get involved in helping other people heal and deal with how do we make decisions about these stressors when we want to be successful and we want to make money and we want to, you know, do a good job, but we also want to take care of ourselves.
Right. Wow. Boom.
Drop the mic. Right?
Right. I mean, you know, Dana and I have been building this business for a little over 2 years now. And yes, I can so relate to that as an entrepreneur, as an American, as a woman, you know, so many levels of me, just the way I was raised, you know, the work ethic, and you just have to have this singular focus. And there is like a fear and anxiety that comes from stopping. And I notice when I am successful at pulling myself away and saying, you know what, my brain is fried. Stop just sitting in front of the computer, overriding that. Go out for a walk, go play with your son, like even fold a load of laundry, just unplug from this. And without even trying, things will sort of process in my brain and I'll come back and do what I needed to do instead of sitting there for 2 hours struggling to get this task done. Yes. I'll do it in 10 minutes.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
It's all taken shape. I know what I have to do. I've been doing other stuff. My joy is, you know, my mental state, my mindset is up here in the positive, and boom, I just can bust it out so much faster.
Exactly.
And you know, American personality or something, because, you know, we moved to Costa Rica. We up and moved before it was the cool thing to do. There was no Facebook and all that stuff when we did. And all of our friends and family were anxious about us.
Yeah.
Not in a good way.
Yeah.
Like, because we were going to stop. We weren't going to do the status quo. We were putting an end to it.
Yeah.
We were going to stop being busy, and they were all annoyed or frustrated or had anxiety around that. That's yes. How much we as an American society, you know, put accolades and all the good stuff into being busy. And
you're still here. Right? You're still here and you're still doing well and doing good work. And
here I am. But we stopped. We did it, and it changed, and it just frustrated and just confused people. And I think it's because we have that as an American society. We have that, no, you're not going to be able to do that and be productive and live a life. And, you know, you can't do that. And for 8 years, oh no, you'll be back in a year, you know, and it's interesting. It took me doing that, you know.
We have a similar path because I went to the Caribbean for 8 years shortly after that. So we'll have to compare.
Yeah, definitely. Where'd you land?
I lived in a tiny 5 square mile island called Saba, which is in the view of St. Martin. It's often used as the King Kong mountain.
We went to St. Martin for our honeymoon, so I have heard of it. Yeah.
When you look out in the distance, there's this weird sort of Switzerland-looking Caribbean island, and that's where I lived.
Wow.
But you know, here's the thing that I love about what both of you shared is that you know, so Ginny, when you found out that working less and doing something nice for yourself allowed you to process or digest stuff, so that when you came back, you were getting it done quickly. So you took time out to process or digest the information. And Dana, you left to do something that everybody else was terrified to do. You stopped at a young age, and both of you came back with, I would guess, some level of trust and faith in following what your hearts were asking you to do. And that's part of healing, I think, is, you know, we think that we have to rush off and go pray 8 hours a day or something to develop faith. But sometimes developing faith is when you follow your heart on something, or you follow your intuition on something, and you find out that it actually supported you. Mm-hmm. And it helped you in your healing. And it wasn't something that a doctor or an expert or your friend or somebody else told you to do. It was something that you had a feeling of doing, and you did it, and you developed a trust in yourself. And I think of that as sort of like a third chakra thing. A lot of digestive issues can be, you know, found in that center of the body where the third chakra is. And it's how we digest and process life. And when I was thinking about, like, when you think about the thyroid and you think about fifth chakra, authenticity, am I speaking my truth? Am I living my truth? I always think that part of my journey to living my truth was to trust that the way that I digest and process information in the world. I don't digest and process information the way the person next to me does. Like, as a writer, when I started writing, I'm not the kind of writer that is like Louise Hay and Wayne Dyer, where they would get up at, say, 4 o'clock in the morning or 5 o'clock in the morning. They would write for 4 hours on schedule, and then they were done for the day. And it sounds fabulous. Not me. The way I process information is I think about the topic, and then I have to have an entire day off with no schedule, not even a massage, like nothing scheduled that day. And then I start writing when I feel like it. So if I've got to get that article in by 5:30 and it doesn't start showing up in my brain of what I want to write till 5, that seems like it could be a little stressful. But I learned to trust the process. And what I found out about myself is I'm kind of a one and done writer. Like, I write something, like a lot of stuff, and I'm done. And it almost requires very little editing. But I have to do it in the way that works for me. It has to come in when it's ready to come in. So I can't force that. And I think it's true for me in terms of other things that I do. Like, I have to allow that space for new ideas and new things to come in, or else it's not right for me. And if I'm in an environment that forces my creativity or forces me to do something, I feel not good enough, inadequate, all the things that sort of takes the gas out of my third chakra, you know, and makes me think that I'm not able to live my truth or live the way I want to, or say what I want to say, because the way I process isn't good enough for the person next to me or for the company that I'm in. So I think to some degree, owning your truth is owning how you need to do things in the world, and really getting comfortable with your own patterns and your own, the way you go about things, and just
not being ashamed of them.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that in the being ashamed is why we're not feeling good enough a lot of the time. We feel like we have to justify when we want something. Like, you know, I'm about to move to Thailand, and I've got a Hay House radio show, and, you know, I'm going to be, you know, 12 to 15 hours ahead, 15 hours ahead of the time zone. And I've got to call and let the show go, which for a lot of people would be like, that's a stupid decision. You've got this international audience and the whole thing. And I'm saying, I don't know why I have to go do this, but I have to go do this. And so that I know that about myself when I feel pulled to doing something. I don't always know why. And I have to let go of things that other people think I'm crazy for letting go of. Just like, Dana, you heard from all the people when you left for Costa Rica.
No, and you know, it's funny because as you're saying this, I have this vision of all these women in their business suits standing up and, well, dropping the mic, but dropping their pen and getting up and walking out of their office right now. Like, I have this like vision of people going, oh, well, okay, this shit's not working for me.
Yeah.
Not really, but I have this like, once you kind of get, not only this is kind of what I need to do and I need to speak my truth, but this is how I actually speak my truth. I spoke my truth by moving away. I know it doesn't make sense to you. I know it doesn't make sense to you. I know it might have felt hurtful, and I know it, I know it was, unorthodox in a way, but it really felt good for me. When I landed, I say this all the time. I say it to my husband, when my feet hit the ground, I had never been there before. When my feet hit the ground, I was a different person. I knew instinctively. So listen to that.
Yes.
Right? Don't walk out of your office right now. But when you do walk out, maybe you walk a little faster. Maybe you don't come back. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, my guess is, Dana, that I know for me, when we were planning, we sold our house, we sold all our stuff. We moved to the Caribbean. It took us a year to get everything in place. It's not like, some people might be able to just rush off, but we actually made a budget. We decided how we were going to do this, how we were going to make it work. I think that there's a practicality behind it because it can be very scary. And so if you're somebody that there are going to be some people watching who have a high risk tolerance and they can leave their job tomorrow and go, come what may. Right. And then I don't have that risk tolerance. I'm more like, I can take a risk, but I got to make a little plan. So, I think people get worried about change in that way without realizing that they can take time to start to make the change, because as soon as you have the energy of that change, as soon as you know it's coming and you have the energy of freedom around the corner and you're making your plan, healing starts to happen. And relief starts to happen, and you start to be less stressed about all the things because there's a light at the end of the tunnel. And so if anybody's feeling like they need to leave their job, or I had people coming into my office before I left because everybody knew I was leaving and that I was moving to the Caribbean when I was at my corporate job. I had people coming into my office and they started telling me their big dreams. And one of the women came in and said, this job is kind of killing me, but I can't leave my job. And I said, well, you don't have to leave just because I'm leaving. Your healing doesn't have to come from leaving your job, but don't you want to listen to the fact that you're saying the job is killing you? And, don't you want to wouldn't you like to take some steps so that it didn't feel that way anymore? And she didn't pay it. She said that to me. She left my office. She was considering maybe hiring a coach or something like that. And she ended up not doing it. And within 2 years, she was like she had to leave work with a disability because she was so sick. And this is what I think happens to the body is there was an LA trauma doctor who, and I don't have his quote in front of me, but I'll kind of try to paraphrase it. He was watching all these people in the ER, and he left one day and was reflecting on what he was seeing with people's health. And he said that, the body announces its existence. So you'll have a lung with tuberculosis that starts to bleed, or cells that start to express cancer. The body is going to announce its existence, and that always makes me think about So I'm Haudenosaunee, which is Iroquois, and one of the things that I learned as I was looking into my culture and my medicine from a Haudenosaunee perspective is there's a whole concept in Native American medicine that one of the big aspects of health is unfulfilled desires of the soul. And when I started learning about what that meant, it made a lot of sense to me. And it made sense to me when he said the body announces its existence. Our bodies are our intuitive tuning forks. And we have this frontal lobe, this right brain that's making us follow the rules and do what everybody told us to do and pay our bills and stay safe, and then we have our right brain, which is where our intuitive tissue is. And interestingly enough, we have intuitive right brain tissue in the gut and intuitive right brain tissue in the heart. And in the embryo stage, when a baby is sort of the cells are all dividing, there's this clump of tissue, and one goes into the gut, one goes into the heart, and it divides 3 times. So gut, heart, brain. Guess which one comes online first?
The gut.
The heart.
Oh, I was going to say the gut too.
Yeah. Now here's what's interesting, because I think you know what the reason you said the gut is because there's a really important reason. The heart goes online first, the gut comes online second, and the brain comes online last. And the thing that we know about health now that we're understanding more about gut health, is that without the gut, the heart and the brain can't survive.
Right.
So the gut is the key. The heart is sort of like a guide, but the guide can start faltering if the gut is faltering. And so our heart, where we have intuitive brain tissue, and it's been proven that decisions and emotions get determined from the heart and send signals to the brain, and so does the gut. And they're all connected by something called the vagus nerve. It's VAGUS. It's been indicated in things like depression and digestive issues and stuff like that. It's the longest brain nerve in the body. And it is like like the information superhighway for the body. And so all these messages are going back and forth 24/7. So imagine that from a divine perspective, we had intuitive tissue lodged deep in the body, and that is connected by a nerve that goes to the brain, which is now we've got this intuitive brain tissue in the body that is telling the brain what we came here to do and what we need to do, because we have gut reactions, and a lot of intuition is actually originating in the body, because the body can feel a lot of things and it knows when it's under stress. And so the idea of unfulfilled desires of the soul is connecting to what our heart really wants. And how do we do that? We have to get quiet, because nobody can tell you. Nobody can give you that answer. It's not written anywhere. Psychics can't even give you that answer. They might help you feel better about things that you might have already known, or they might help you feel better about, some information that you just didn't have access to, but they can't tell you what you need to do and what would fulfill you and what you came here to do. That's a really internal process. Mm-hmm. And what I found is that the more we nourish our gut, the more intuition develops. So you are basically nourishing your intuitive tissue in your body. And as that tissue, the boundary, leaky gut is a leaky boundary. So as that boundary gets healed, suddenly you feel better about having boundaries in your life. It's easier to say no. It's easier to think about, do I want to be a people pleaser or not? And in fact, from a willpower perspective, willpower being, I really want to follow this self-care routine, and then you stop doing it after a week. Willpower is not for special people. The studies done on willpower is that the direct correlation to willpower is your blood sugar levels. So if you've got a leaky gut, or you're dieting and not feeding yourself well, or you're eating a lot of sugar and things that send your blood sugar like this, your willpower is going to be like this, or your willpower is going to be low. And then it's the same biochemical mechanism that your decision-making is attached to. So not only is your willpower going to suffer, but your decision-making is going to suffer. So this is where we see people start feeling overwhelmed and analysis paralysis and stuff like that. So think about the idea that if we just nourished ourselves well, we would have an internal connective tissue boundary that would remind us to have good, healthy boundaries in our lives, because it would fuel the things that we need in our body to make better decisions and follow our goals and things like that. So when I think about unfulfilled desires of the soul, it's not just making a plan and following it. It's how are we nourishing ourselves? How are we taking care of ourselves so that we have the strength, the resilience, the willpower, the decision-making capabilities to move forward on our path?
There's just this golden thread that I feel like has woven itself through our whole conversation today, of just that tuning in and connecting, and the interconnectedness of all the systems in our bodies and of us to one another and everything, and also listening. Like we talk a lot about speaking your truth, and I think the image or idea that comes to mind is speaking your truth to others, but it's also about speaking truth to ourselves and listening to and honoring that, right?
Yes.
I'm so feeling that, on such a gut level, if you will, from your message today. So thank you for that. It's so powerful. And what a way to lead by example too, with your work and your life example of saying, look, this is who I am and this is how I work.
Yeah.
And if I don't honor that, I can't be well.
I can't be of service to you or to me or to anybody.
Right. I mean, it's at some point, if we're making a commitment to living our truth at the fifth chakra level, we have to make decisions that are going to be unpopular to other people. We're going to have to let people down. We're going to have to say no to things. We're not going to show up as often because we're taking more time to live a reverent life. And that takes stillness, and it takes, time for rest, and it takes things like that. So we're going to be unpopular with some people in our lives. And the thing is that we all know that the people who really love us are going to support us in that. And so we just saved ourselves a lot of time in trying to figure out who the right people are for us.
Yeah.
Because the right people are the ones who will support us in that. And I think, I'll just say this has not been an easy journey. I feel like it's been decades long in this healing journey. And that's why when people come to me and they're in a panic over their health, they want it to be fixed right away. If we shortcut the healing process, we want from our minds, we're all stressed out wanting to shortcut the healing process. We shortcut also the weaving together of who we are that comes from having to make the decisions we have to make when we're healing. I wish
from the process, right?
Yeah.
And having to go through it, right?
I wish
no shortcuts.
Exactly. I wish people would be motivated to heal themselves before they got sick, because if I were to chart my health, I mean, yes, I had a genetic condition, et cetera, but had I eaten better, maybe it never would have gotten as bad as it was. If I had known how to, not be a workaholic, if I had known these things. But it got to the point where I had sort of this crisis and was on my knees and had to figure out what to do. And that's why I think I was as motivated as I was, because it was not going to work for me to be binging and purging every day as a lifestyle. That was not going to work for me. So I had a heavy motivation to find out what was going on and really do everything that needed to be done, because I did not want that to be my life. And I think that health, when the body announces itself, it's giving us an opportunity not just to heal a symptom, but to heal our lives. And if we're willing to take that journey, we're going to have to peel back those layers of all the things we've been tolerating that we don't want to tolerate anymore. And we're going to have to redesign a life that works for us. And healing becomes a side effect of that. But at the end, I don't think I've ever spoken with anyone who's recovered who said that they regret having the illness that they had. Mm-hmm. Because even for me, I don't know that I would be living the way I'm living now if I hadn't had that journey. I might be still in a corporate environment, working 12 to 16 hours a day. I'd be financially independent and all of that stuff, but I wouldn't have the richness of the life that I have. And so I think it came to a head for me a few years ago when I stepped on the land, when I went to Standing Rock, which I don't know if you know, it was a pipeline that was going through Lakota Sioux territory. And it was going to affect, because all pipelines have leaks, and they leak into the water, and they leak on the land, and they leak into the air, and they affect the food supply and people's water systems and things like that. People came from all over the world, and 500 indigenous nations showed up on that land. And on that land was a lot of people who were in the midst of ceremony. Every day there was ceremony. Each different nation had their ceremony. So every day everybody gathered in community. And it reminded me that at one time all of us would wake up in the morning and look into the eyes of their community before we became separate in our own homes. And we spent more time on Facebook than we did with people. And so community is connective tissue. It is the connective tissue of the human race when we stand in community. They taught us while I was there how to do peaceful, prayerful, sort of not so much a protest, but a prayerful action. And when we were practicing doing prayerful action, because there were no weapons and nothing, you had to, when you were facing off against a militarized police force with no weapons, the only thing we had was to lock arms with the person on our left and the person on our right. And they taught us how to lock our arms and walk together in community so that we could all be safe. And there were rows and rows of people, and I was like in the third row, and I couldn't see anything in front of me because of all the people in front of me. And obviously I couldn't see behind me. But everybody that locked arms in that community as we moved forward and moved to the side had each other's back and communicated to each other and said, there's a rock in the field and there's a hole over here. Everybody watch out. And if somebody fell back a little bit, the other person caught them. And it was like a physical feeling to me of having a supportive community where you felt safe, where I might be willing to go out in front of a militarized police force with their big, shields and their guns and everything, that I could stand there with no weapons and still feel safe because I had all of these people around me who had my back. And it was a big learning for me. When I stepped on that land, I started to have some of the worst symptoms I've ever had, and my digestive system stopped functioning. And I realized that I was experiencing intergenerational trauma, which I think some of us have. And science has shown that if your ancestors experienced trauma like the Holocaust or a lot of indigenous people or a war or something like that, it changes the way that we respond to stress. And so some people are actually, with whatever they've got going on with their health, are actually what I call generational pattern shifters, where they are actually stepping up to heal through healing their own DNA, healing these generations of patterns that have been passed down emotionally and through the genetics. And so that was when I realized that was going on with me. And I went home and I decided got heavily involved with my Native American culture. And what I noticed is, just like the things we read about in Ayurvedic medicine and Chinese medicine, where we hear that they get up early in the morning and they do an oil massage and some dry skin brushing and some prayer, and there's this routine. There was a routine of ceremony, of getting up and setting your intentions, creating a central fire with the community, and doing these rituals and routines, singing, dancing, doing things to be a part of the community and to express your faith to the Creator. And as I got involved in these things, I realized that these routines that we no longer have. We no longer have community when we wake up in the morning. We no longer have these day-to-day routines where we stand together and speak our intentions and do these lovely things for our bodies and for our communities that remind us of who we are and clear our mind and make us feel safe and grounded. We don't have those anymore. We don't cook together so that the cooking is easier. When the people get together to cook and they laugh and everybody's preparing it together, it's not so hard anymore. It's kind of fun, actually. We've lost all of these things over the generations, and we all live separately in our homes, and we spend more time on screen than we do with humans. And I think that we've lost so much of the fabric of what makes us human. And yet at the same time, our genes haven't changed in all of that time. So here we are, genetically wired to be communal people walking the earth and eating natural foods from the earth and looking in each other's eyes and setting our intentions and doing these things to keep our bodies functioning well. And we've sort of ripped all of that out and are living these isolated lives where we're too tired and too afraid to be who we came here to be. So I think that when I speak about unfulfilled desires of the soul, that is a journey where we're coming back to finding out what are those pieces that we need in our lives for our health, our well-being, and our joy. And most of the time, those things are things that are going to feel scary and are going to take you're going to become the person taking the path less chosen, like Dana moving off to Costa Rica. And you're going to be one of those people doing something very, very different. You're going to be eating differently from the rest of your family, or people are going to think you're crazy or whatever it is. And that's what starts to happen when we start going on walking that path. But what you're doing when you do it is you're you're healing those things, those epigenetic pieces, the things that have nothing to do with food, medicine, and, you know, sort of the day-to-day stuff in your life, but the stuff that reconnect you to the unseen, the part of us that knows that we're safe with when we don't have a plan, and we're safe when we're not sure if this is going to work or not, and we're safe moving towards our big dream. Mm-hmm. So that's what I learned. And I actually healed. I would say it was the biggest healing that I've ever done in my life, because none of my food things were working anymore. And the only thing that was working was showing up and doing my ancestral routines and ceremonies and taking care of myself in that way every day, and saying no to the things that took me away from taking care of myself in that way. That I felt stronger, and I felt more courageous about being who I was. And I know that in Native communities and Indigenous communities, they have that. That's what they want you. They want you to feel connected to your creation story. Why are we here as a human race? They want you to feel connected to who you are and what you came here to do. Even the names that they give you when you get a Native name, it's a name that has to do with a clan mother who's watched you and looked at your lineage, and they give you a name based off of your gifts and what you came here to do. So there was much more of a focus on allowing you to be who you are and celebrating that. And these days, we don't have that focus. We have a focus on trying to keep up with everybody else or else. And so if we can all make a pact together today to let that go, and to start being the oddball, and to start being the one who's taking that path less taken, and start making like even just one different decision a day, I think that it can be the most healing thing that we can do.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that powerful message with us, and that wisdom, and there's so much truth in that. There's just a million. I feel like I need to go get my journal and just somewhere quiet.
Hurry. Like,
right?
You know, like me too. Thank you, Heather.
I mean, it's
my pleasure.
Valuable messaging for everyone, and I think especially for our thyroid community. You know.
Yeah. So one thing I just want to say to everybody is, if you go back to your ancestors before the 1800s, maybe do a little research, find out what they were eating, speak their language, learn a word like hello, goodbye, I love you, thank you, and say those words, and eat the foods that they were eating before the 1800s. Try some things like that, because that's where we bring the unseen back into our bodies. It's not woo-woo, because our DNA is an echo of our ancestors, and they knew how to eat better than we do. When they walked the land, their feet felt the medicine. And so they knew what to do in ways that we have lost today. But I think that as we bring those rituals and the language and their ceremonies and things, items that they might have liked and used back into our lives, and we remind ourselves how they were living their lives, it's a great way to speak to your DNA without having to run out and get a report like I did and have somebody read it for you and tell you what to eat. It's a great way to kind of do it on your own as a nice sacred way of healing and remembering where you fall in your lineage.
And to feel connected.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, you said something that really struck a chord about, you haven't really met very many people who have said, I regret getting this disease, because it can teach you so much, right? If you let it. And, one of my favorite quotes is, the body speaks to us. If we listen to its whispers, we don't have to endure its screams.
Yes.
And I think that just kind of plays into all these pieces, right? That it's like this big web. And so much of what you've done here with us today is, I think, brought so much inspiration to us coming back to that connection with ourselves, with each other, with our histories, with the earth, and so we can feel well and thrive and be whole, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So thank you so much for that.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
An incredible conversation.
Lots of goosebump moments.
I know. I want to keep going.
Me too.
But thank you all for joining us for another episode of Thyroid Refresh TV, where we give you the information and inspiration you need to make the best choices for your health. To receive your free Thyroid Thrivers grocery guide, you can visit us at thyroidrefresh.com. And to learn more about Thyroid 30, our revolutionary 30-day wellness adventure, go to thyroidrefresh.com/thyroid30. You do have the power to heal, and we have the tools. And with our post of this podcast, or we have a video post on the site, we'll be sure and give you guys some links to lots of Heather Dane's her resources, and where you can find more of her work online and connect with all the amazing things that she has to teach us.
And if you've enjoyed this podcast and would like to help us continue inspiring and empowering thyroid patients worldwide, please leave us a review on iTunes. It would make our day. You are what makes this community the amazing resource it is, and we so appreciate your listenership and your support. We're Dana and Jenny, wishing you the best of health. See you next time. Thank you so much.